Hi friends, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm finally doing another bookshelf tour. I actually filmed my very first YouTube video a few years ago. It was a full collection tour and it was like an hour long. And looking back, it felt a little overwhelming to go through my entire collection. So this time, instead of going through everything, I'm just going to share one bookshelf with you, the one that sits in the background of my videos recently, and it's also the newest bookshelf in our home. I think it's meaningful to start off with this one. This shelf, if any of you recognize it, it's the vintage IKEA Enetri shelf designed by Niels Gammelgaard in the 1980s. It has a very minimal look with metal frame and clean wooden shelves. Nothing's extra, but over the years it becomes a bit of design classic. People loved it for how simple and timeless it is, including me, of course. And since it's no longer in production, it shows up on the used market, usually at a pretty steep price. I have been eyeing this shelf for a very long time, like years, and I finally found one last fall. It's not super crazy price. I still remember bringing it home and just feel like, okay, this is one of those pieces that I'll keep it for a very long time, despite it was made like 20-30 years ago. It's one of those rare things that feels both practical and I think it's really beautiful. And I see on the social media, most of people use this as a statement piece in their home to put more like decoration items on them, but I'm actually just use it as a proper bookshelf. So the shelf, how I use it, it's a little different from the rest of my bookshelves. Most of the books here are either special editions, signed copies, first editions, and the collections from some of my favorite authors, or just books that feel important to me. Sometimes it's not even about how rare those books are, it's just that something about them stayed with me. So this shelf feels like a small archive of things I don't want to lose, if that makes sense. Okay, let's starting from the top shelf. On the far left, I have a plant that has somehow survived here for about a year now, which is honestly a bit surprising. Next to it, I have two of my film cameras. I do use them in my client sessions, but I also keep them here because they're just so beautiful. This one is Pentax LX. It's a 35mm camera, and this big one is a Pentax 6.7 Mark II. It's a medium format camera. And then moving into the books, this middle section holds most of my special editions. Starting off Winesburg, Ohio by Sherwood Anderson. It's one of my favorite short story collections, and this one is a leather-bound edition. Next is probably one of my favorite physical books in my entire collection. It's the 20th anniversary UK edition of Never Let Me Go by Kazuo Ishiguro, and it's a signed copy. I will just cherish this forever. It took such a journey to finally get this copy. I was honestly over the moon when I finally got it. I also have the first edition of The Memory Police by Yoko Ogawa. It's a dystopian novel that I really adore. And the first edition of Lonely Castle in the Mirror by Mitsuki Tsujimura. This was one of my favorite reads from 2024. It's more of a recent favorite. There's a theme in this book that still hits me hard whenever I thought about it. I highly recommend this book to anyone. There's also a special edition of 100 Years of Solitude by Gabriel Garcia Marquez. It's one of my favorite magical realism literary pieces. And the first edition of Pure Lancy by Susanna Clark. These next couple books are by an author I have decided not to talk about on my channel anymore. It's a bit unfortunate. I used to really love his work, and I do have a few signed first editions by him, but I just don't feel comfortable supporting him anymore. And then I have the first edition of The City and the City by China Miéville. and the leatherbound edition of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy by Douglas Adams. One book I was really excited to find is If Not Winter, Fragments of Sappho. It was translated by Anne Carson. This is actually the first US edition, which made it feel even more special to me. What I love even more though is that this copy has this handwritten message on the title page. You can tell it was once a gift to someone years ago. Because of that, it actually wasn't super expensive compared to some collectible copies. But honestly, that handwritten note is part of why I fell in love with this book. I always feel weirdly emotional finding old books that once belonged to someone else, especially when there's evidence of a real human connection inside. It feels like carrying a tiny piece of someone's life and story forward through time. There's something really beautiful about that to me. And I also have the 20th anniversary edition of Cloud Atlas by David Mitchell. And this one is a signed copy as well that I randomly came upon in Barnes & Noble once. I think I might walk into Barnes & Noble once a year, but just that one time I stumbled upon the signed copy. I was so lucky. And here are a few of my Folio Society edition of some of my all-time favorite books. Station 11 by Emily St. John Mandel, Clara and the Sun by Kazuo Ishiguro. I actually missed getting the signed version when it came out. I was so bummed about that. And The Lottery and Other Dark Tales by Shirley Jackson. And this is two books in one. Do Android Dream of Electronic Sheep by Philip K. Dick and A Scanner Darkly, also by him. Neverwhere by so-and-so. 1984 by George Orwell. I believe Folio Society released several different editions of 1984, and this is the newest edition. I also have an Easton Press edition of The Martian Chronicle by Ray Bradbury. And another 1984. This one is a UK anniversary edition signed by the illustrator. So whenever I come across a copy I love for my favorite books, I just pick it up from the used bookshop. So here are a bunch of different copies of 1984 and The Martian Chronicles. And I also have Yukio Mishima's Sea of Fraternity series in vintage paperback editions. Here are Spring Snow, The Tempo of Dawn, The Decay of the Angel, and The Sound of Waves. Now moving down to the second shelf, at the far left side, I have two handmade ceramic pieces here made by my friend, and I put a vinyl cover that I really like the mood. I just like to display here. For the middle section, here is my Haruki Murakami collection. I have collected the full set of his vintage US editions, all from used bookstores. It honestly took me years to complete. Dance, 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 Sputnik, Sweetheart, The Elephant Vanishes, A Wild Sheep Chase, Underground, Hard-Boiled Wonderland and the End of the World, After the Quake, South of the Border, West of the Sun, Blind Willow, Kafka on the Shore, What I Talk About When I Talk About Running, Norwegian Wood, and After Dark, The Wind-Up Bird Chronicle, and 1QA4, The City and Its Uncertain Walls, Kanonist Tsukuru Tazaki, Killing Commendator, First Person Singular, and I have a Portuguese edition of Kafka on the Shore, and the first US edition of Kafka on the Shore, and also the first US edition of 1QA4 and a 3-volume edition of 1QA4. And now I have also started to collect the newer paperback editions for rereading, so I don't have to highlight in the old copies. And here I have a couple of film cameras that I don't use for client session, but more for collecting or just for everyday use. Now on to the third shelf. This section is mostly UK editions with more modern literary fictions. A lot of them are signed copies. Most of them I also have owned the US editions, but I just really love their UK edition as well. Here we have Station 11 by Emily St. John Mandel, Stories of Your Life and Others by Ted Chan, The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood, The Lamb by Lucy Rose. This is actually the only book that I haven't read in this entire bookshelf. It's also a signed copy. Denial by John Raymond, Launch Something by Bae Min-hoon, To the Moon by Jang Ring-jim, Leonard and Hungry Pope by Ronan Haitian, Things Remembered and Things Forgotten by Kyoko Nakajima, Ghost Roots by Pemi Aguda, Ripe by Sarah Rose Etter, another Station 11 by Emily St. John Mandel, and this one is a signed copy. The Last Children of Tokyo by Yoko Tawada, To the Warm Horizon by Chom Jin-yam, Sea of Tranquility by Emily St. John Mandel, We Are Together Because by Carrie Andrew, Shy by Max Porter. Right in the middle is another section for one of my favorite authors, Kazuo Ishiguro. I have a pale view of Hills, When We Were Orphans, The Unconsoled, Look Tombs, The Remains of the Day, An Artist of the Floating World, and multiple editions of Never Let Me Go. These are the Fable and a Fable editions, and also the first edition of Clara and the Sun, and the first edition of Buried Giant. And I found this book in a random used book in Tokyo. It's Never Let Me Go in Japanese, and the words printed in vertical lines. I think it's so cute. Next to those, we have some contemporary authors I really love. A Thousand Blues by Qian Xian Run. I think this one is a signed copy as well. Good and Evil and Other Stories by Samantha Stribling. The Midnight Timetable by Bora Cham, Glyph by Ali Smith, All That We See or Seem by Ken Liu. And I also have all the books from Sayaka Murata. She's my new favorite author. I have The Earthlings, Convenience Store Woman, Life Ceremony, The Vanishing Road. Next to Murata, I have the books by Sean Tan. He's one of my favorite artists, so I have collected most of his works. The Bird King, Tales from the Inner City, Tales from Outer Suburbia, Lost and Found, Rose of Summer, The Arrival, and Creature. Over here, I have a small collection of Chinese books. These are some of my favorite books in Chinese. I have After Dark by Murakami, On Scene, The 100% Perfect Girl on Beautiful April Morning, also by Murakami. Also Walden by Henry David Thoreau, Animal Farm by George Orwell, and Love Letter. This is a film screen script by Shunji. At the bottom shelf, I have some of my favorite photography books. I won't go too deep into these since I know not everyone here is into photography, but these are honestly some of my most cherished items. Lastly, we also have a couple of graphic novels that I absolutely love, mostly for the artwork. We have On a Sunbeam by Tilly Walden, Tokyo These Days by Taiyo Matsumoto. This one is a manga. And Quiet Girl in a Noisy World by Debbie Tam, and A Gnome in Space and A City Inside, both by Tilly Walden. And that's everything on this shelf. It's definitely a more curated bookshelf compared to my others. Out of over 1,000 books I own, which honestly, I mostly keep the ones I truly love. And these books are the ones I have chosen to collect in special editions. It's not a huge collection by any means, but over time, I felt it becomes a reflection of who I am, what I've been thinking about, and what stayed with me. So I'm really enjoying going through these with you guys. I'm actually enjoying to go through every single items. That's not just for showing you guys, but also something for myself. If you have made this far, thank you for spending this time with me. I'd love to know, do you have a shelf like this for books very special to you? And if you're interested in seeing my full collection, I do have another 7 bookshelves plus quite a few overflowing stacks on the floor and windowsills everywhere in my house. So there's definitely more to share. Anyway, I'll see you in the next video. Bye!